Thanks, Brian, for coming in. Brian shows up to Toastmasters about once every 6 months. And you did bamboozle me, Brian, because you show up so very infrequently, and then you speak like that. And you're a very good, very natural speaker, very confident. And so that is kind of perplexing. Brian he gave a very excellently delivered speech. He's a great speaker. A lot of the things that he wanted to do, he wanted to appear credible on stage in front of people, appear like he was a subject expert, matter expert, appear like he knew what he was talking about. He did those things very well, had all of those cards kind of in spades. If you just look at him, I mean, he's dressed in professional attire, he's got the nerd glasses on that show that he knows a lot about taxes. But also he was up here, he's giving very corporate executive types of gestures, right? He had a good posture, he had a very relaxed but confident speaking voice and style. He was excited, but not excited in a way that was unprofessional. And he was giving dynamic gestures, but also not gestures that were, in a way, unprofessional as well. So you walked that line really well of being confident and energized, but also appearing professional, which is a hard line to walk. Where I think you could develop a little bit of this speech a little bit better is in the structure of it. I think the speech itself, I believe your intent was to inform and empower finance people to understand what's going on with the tax changes, right? That was my interpretation. You started off really strong. You came out here and engaged with the audience, which is essential to do, especially in a speech about such a dry topic. You asked a question, who's in finance, whatever, you started engaging with people. That was really good. It fell off the rails a little bit when you got into the death by PowerPoint. And I'm going to get into that now, if I can. Andrew, can I have this computer? So this is a disease that kind of afflicts everybody in corporate life. We're all guilty of it, so I don't want to pick on you, Brian. I'm just going to kind of use you and your speech as an example of how we can all improve. Now, the thing about these slides, none of us, I'm going to say, in this room gets paid to speak or make slides professionally. Right? That's not our jobs. Brian's job is probably to be a finance guy at his company, right? So he spends his job making reports that include all of this information. And then at some point he's called upon in his life to speak. And he thinks, what am I going to do? I'm going to make a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to copy and paste the content that I've created from these reports onto my PowerPoint presentation. The problem is that reading and listening to a speech are two very different mediums. And while it's one thing to read all of these words in a report, and this would have been a great handout to give to your audience so they had all the information because it's very technical and they need all of that information. But when it's up here on the screen, what it's doing is it's competing for your attention, for the audience's attention rather. And so the audience is kind of distracted because there are maybe 100 words on each of these slides, and they feel like they're expected to read all of them. And at the same time, you're talking, and the slides are moving, and it's making them very nervous and uncomfortable. What would be better is if you just turned the slides off entirely and just spoke to the audience and gave them an overview of what was going to happen. There were also the structure of the speech. I noticed that a lot of times you'd get into the details before you went into the broader points. So a lot of times, especially when you're talking about offshore taxes and all that kind of stuff, you kind of go into each specific item and what it meant, and then afterwards you told us, this is just so people, giant companies can't keep all their money offshore, and we can take some of that back to the United States. It would have been, I think, much more effective if you had given the audience the overview. Hey, this section is about offshore investments. The whole purpose of it is to do this. And then you can get to the minute details one by one. So when you're structuring sections of a speech, always start broad and then kind of get narrower, and especially with dry subjects like this, that'll help people understand and get a context, an emotional context for all of the information before you start throwing it at them. The last thing I would mention about the structure, pretend that the Rhino audience is the intended audience, right? Assume that this is going to be for finance people who need this information. So your intention is not to bore them to death. So I think it was a little bit too self-deprecating at the beginning when you said 3 or 4 times that you were going to try not to bore us to death. Just pretend that this is really exciting information, there's new tax codes, and this is information that all of you guys need. And I think if you just restructured your speech a little bit like that, avoided the death by PowerPoint, then you could be on your way to becoming the new CFO of a startup that has less than $25 million in gross revenues. So, thanks again.